Fun to hear their story. It's fun to see how God weaves people's lives together. We had joked about when we were in the Chipotle line about how God weaves different lines, our storylines together and our lives together. And so I don't want to take much of their time. I just want to say that we're blessed to have them here. It's exciting to hear their story. And one thing I want to say is I appreciate how when God called them to give up the comforts of living in America to go overseas, that they were willing to do that with children. So anyway, I'm going to give it over to you guys and let you guys introduce yourselves and take it from there.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Maybe let's just step over here. Well, good morning, Risen Church. Yeah, and thank you, Pastor, for giving us the opportunity to really just testify of what the Lord has done in our lives and what we see on the horizon. So I am Morgan, and this is my beautiful wife, Laura. You will get to hear from her. But this morning, I just want to open with, you get the chance to preach, you preach, right? So it was really incredible, just how the Lord works. This morning, I woke up just right away getting out of bed, and the word came in my heart, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And some may have heard that verse, and some may have not, but I was like, whoa, okay, because it was just so tangible in my spirit that's what the Lord said. And so I really feel like the purpose of our time here this morning is to share the freedom that our family has found only through Christ, and then how we hope to bring the message of Jesus Christ, the hope of the gospel, and that freedom to these young people in Zambia. And so just another amazing thing. And so I go to my Bible this morning after that, and I just flip it open, and where do I land? 2 Corinthians chapter 3. On my bullet notes on the side, big, bold, black letters, freedom. So not only was that word just dropped in my heart, I opened the Bible to the page of this verse. And so I just want to speak this verse over you all this morning and just really give glory to the Lord, because that is who deserves the glory and the praise. It's Jesus. And so this is what the Lord does. So 2 Corinthians 3, verses 16 through 18. But when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. And so you're going to hear a little bit about that this morning, more so about my stubbornness in the Lord and how he has taken us and me on a journey to become more like him. And it's really the work of the Spirit in my life that has done this and led us to the point where we're at today. And so here we go. So Zambia, this is the place where the Lord has partnered with us to serve. And we'll get a little bit more into Zambia in a moment, but if you could go to the next slide, please. So it's important to understand a little bit about our journey. My childhood was dysfunctional. Both of my parents were heavily addicted to drugs. My father was absent due to incarceration. And I don't have to dig deep into that. It was a mess. And as a result of that, I was not raised up as the scriptures would say, right? Train a child up in the way he should go. I was left for the world to raise me. And as a result, I got into drugs and alcohol and a criminal lifestyle at a very, very young age. But praise God that he did have another plan. And so when I was 18 years old, I found myself as well, like my father, sitting in jail and just really contemplating my life. How did I get here? Like, my life doesn't make sense. I know there's a different way to live, but I have no understanding of what that looks like. And that's where I started reading the Bible. And light bulbs literally came on for me. And I understood, because of Genesis, of how sin had infected this world, and it's just destroying and breaking apart what God has created for good. And so that was my journey with Christ. I came to faith at that point, 2004, as a young man, and the Lord really began to transform me and just turn me into a whole new creation, just like the word says. And I went to Teen Challenge for the first time in 2005. And that was really where the Lord laid on my heart overseas missions. And as a 20-year-old young man, I'm sad to say that I had different ambitions. It was too great of a call at that time. Dedicate my whole life. I'm 20, Lord. Like, I love you. I want to serve you, but go overseas and give the best years of my life. And so, much like Jonah, I resisted and ran from that call. And, there were some good years. I had a lot of good growth and experiences as far as a career and a vocation, which the Lord is now going to use, and we'll share about that. I got into concrete and masonry and had a good career, but I really pursued the wealth, the American dream. And as that became my heart's desire and affection, my love for Christ became colder and colder. And so then that led to a period of darkness, which I'll share a little bit. But so Laura and I were married in 2012. And that's a huge part of our testimony. And so what happened is I had about 9 years of sobriety at that point, but I had a back injury, and I didn't deal with it. And I ended up using again with opiates, which was something that I had never encountered before. And so I'm going to let Laura speak a little bit about kind of what our early maybe marriage looked like and run us through the chaos, and then we can land the plane on our testimony.
Good morning, everyone. So, like Morgan already alluded to, we met in 2012, and it was we fell fast and hard. We were married within essentially 9 months, and we both had very similar goals for our life. We were active in the church. However, as Morgan shared, he had a back injury and was prescribed opiates. And I grew up in a Christian home. I had no knowledge of addiction. Morgan was actually the first person I had ever met who had been addicted to anything. So I was very naive. And it wasn't until Morgan actually shared with me that he was addicted that I was able to then be aware of why our marriage had become so difficult, why we had so much conflict. So there was a lot of shame in that. From my perspective, thinking that somehow I did something to cause this in his life. He wanted to hide it because he had so many years of sobriety under his belt. We tried to fix it ourselves for a very long time. And that just really amplified the chaos. Our son Owen was born kind of in the middle of the storm. And things just went downhill very quickly. Morgan got arrested, facing prison time, and I didn't know what to do. So he was sentenced to time, and during that time, I just decided that divorce was going to be the easiest option for me and my son to just try to scrape together the life that we had left and move forward. But God had other plans, of course. He sees the bigger picture of all of this. And when Morgan got out, we started kind of just, it was very small communication because there was so much hurt and trauma in that relationship still. So it took a long time for us to even be open to reconciliation, but God made it very clear that that was what he would have for us. And Morgan went back to Teen Challenge in 2018, and during that time, it was very apparent that God was calling us to work on ourselves and heal our relationship with him and put him first, so that then when we were whole in him individually, we could then consider our marriage again. And so we were remarried in 2020, and our daughter Elise was born in 2022, and God just started just throwing the doors open for us, making it very clear that this was for something bigger than just us and our family. So in June of 2023, we left for Atlanta, just kind of starting to get our 10-year-old more acclimated to cross-cultural. We had conversations with missions organizations, and then God just put this random email in our path, and it was he was calling us to Zambia. So we took all of our family there December of last year, and Morgan wouldn't have left if the opportunity would have been there, but we had a lot to wrap up at home. So it was just very clearly on the ground that just the peace and the joy that this was our next step for our family.
Yeah, and I should just point out, and we can go to the next slide, please. You know, we don't have to dwell on all of the chaos and the destruction, but I just have to make it very clear that it was bad. It was, in the eyes of the world, it was dead. You know, because of the sinful behaviors I was bound by, right? I was bound by sin and addiction. I did very terrible things to my family, to those who I love most. And so that trauma of all of that, to work through that over a very intentional period of 2 years, we went through counseling before we said I do, you know, and it took the Lord to heal us, but it wasn't easy. And that's what we've discovered in this journey with the Lord, that the things that bring him the most glory are those which are difficult and in the eyes of the world impossible. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that. The other way, please. Yeah, perfect. So we're going to give you just a brief overview of Zambia to set the context of the need.
So Zambia here in the dark blue, so this is sub-Saharan Africa. You know, we're very near to the equator, but it is very lush. It's very green. They have a rainy season, which is essentially during our winter season. Right now they are in winter in parkas, but it's 80 degrees during the day. So it tells you how hot it is there. But Zambia is essentially known for all the wrong reasons. Extreme poverty, extreme malnourishment. It's a very poverty-stricken country, and they have very large families. There's a lot of people in the rural areas that are still under tribal rule. So, I mean, if you can imagine, so 60% live under $2.50 American equivalent per day, and over 40% of that number is under $1.25. So imagine 5 children, feeding them and being able to also try to farm and provide for your family and keep the crops. It's very difficult. So the reason that Zambia is so dear to our hearts is because there are over 1.4 million orphans. That's the highest orphan rate per capita in the entire world. The reason that this is because HIV/AIDS essentially over 3 decades eliminated multiple generations of families, parents and grandparents primarily, leaving children just being shifted from uncle to uncle to aunt, and essentially children raising children. So 53% of the population is under the age of 17. So it shows you just the inconsistency in the different ages that are living right now in Zambia. And less than 30% of Zambian children will make it to age 18. HIV/AIDS is still the leading cause of death in the country. There are 20,000 new cases per year, so it is still a disease that's ravaging the country.
Next slide, please.
So as you can see here, and that's me, we're feeding during our trip. Thank you, Morgan. So essentially, as part of this number of orphans, there's also a significant amount of children who live on the street. There's essentially 3 different associations of street children. You have the children that have familial homes, who essentially are sent by their families to beg, to sell wares, but they can still go home at the end of the night if they choose to. And then you have children of the street that have family ties, but it's very infrequent. They might be called home when a family member dies, or they make a lot of money and their family desperately needs them, or there's an illness. And then you have abandoned children, essentially, who are just living on the streets. And when I say homeless, like, it is very hard to even communicate to us as Americans what this looks like. But there are children, they literally sleep on top of one another in piles on the streets. There's not blankets, there's not cardboard boxes, there's not tarps. These children are living in drainage ditches, just exposed to any sort of trauma, abuse that you can imagine. And our desire for these children is, it's like as we sang, like, our hope is Jesus. And right now, they have no hope. These children are all addicted to a substance called Bostic, which is a street drug that is a mixture of jet fuel and glue that they huff, they snort. And essentially, it's cheaper than any food that they can purchase. And they don't feel hunger, they don't feel loneliness, they don't feel fear. Just the amount of stories of children who have been abused, assaulted, injured while they've been high on this drug is just, it blows your mind. But each of these children is loved by God and cherished and beautiful in our eyes. And our desire is to pour as much love and care as we can into each one of them.
Next slide, please. So in response to this crisis, Pastor Jasper, who's there, he's Zambian. He was trained as a pastor and evangelist by a U.S.-based organization called Operation Mobilization. They go around the globe looking for indigenous leaders, and they send them through a rigorous discipleship program to train them up. So he did that in the mid-thousands and was faithful to what God called him to. He went out to the bush by faith with a backpack and a tent and started to preach and just love on the rural villages. And he had a thriving ministry there, and Pastor Jason and I talked about this too. You know, when you have this good sweet spot with the Lord, with fellowship, community, and ministry, this is where him and his family were at. And so his wife on the left there is Zion. She's Japanese. Very incredible testimony of how God brought them together. She became a missionary to Africa from Japan, and they met in the bush. But about 12 years ago, Pastor Jasper and his wife felt like the Lord was saying, go back to the capital, which is Lusaka. And so they're like, okay, I mean, you've had us here, things are going very well, but we really believe you're calling us to that. So they did. And they relocated to a single-family home, which you can see the wall in the background. It's concrete with barbed wire on top. That's how residences are in the city. You have a home with a block wall and wire for security. And so they moved there just by faith. And it was at that point that Pastor Jasper encountered the street children. And when Laura had mentioned, you know, there's children on the street in Lusaka, because it's hard to accurately track, we don't have exact figures, but they know it's in the tens of thousands of children, ages 4 on up, just roaming the streets. And so he did what the Lord had called him to do and trained him to do, and he went out and he loved on them through compassion ministry. He would bring food when he could, clothing, but most importantly, he loved on them, he prayed for them, he preached the gospel to them. And so that's how the relationship began between this family and the street children. And as the Lord often does, he works in incredible ways. And the children started to come. 1, 3, 5, 10, 15, as many as 70 children at a time have called Nsanza, which is the ministry, Nsanza Village, their home. And so, next slide, please. This is the current living place of the boys, which is a shipping container, but it's safe. It gets them off of the streets. They're happy. And so what they have done, or what Pastor Jasper has done, is really built a discipleship home. So it's not an orphanage. As the children come, their family, they're not adopted out, but they're trained up for as long as the Lord would have them there. And it's a lot like Teen Challenge, if any of you guys are familiar with Teen Challenge. The foundation is Christ, because Jasper knows if these young ones don't come to know and follow Jesus, then what good are we really doing? And so discipleship is the foundation, praise, worship, intercession. It's really indescribable, the times of worship. And we'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but if teams are able to come over, you'll be able to experience that. And it really is transformational in your walk with the Lord. But then also trauma and counseling. Sexual assault is huge over there, even among the boys. It's just a reality of their situation, but also different abuse. Many of them have been beaten and left for dead. And you hear me say a lot, boys. Well, right now, the ministry is only able to support boys because of the location. Early on, they tried to have boys and girls on the same property, but children who have different behavioral issues, drug addiction, that close proximity didn't work well. So they had to meet the greatest need, which was the boys. There's more boys on the street than girls because families, extended families, will take girls in. We also work with an educator and different partners in the community to provide primary education. Next slide, please. And so, moving ahead, why Laura and I believe that we've been called there and what we've already seen stateside is to help the ministry expand their reach, to help the Lord increase the amount of lives that are able to come and live there and be transformed by Jesus. And so, my background with my childhood, the dysfunction I experienced, the our marriage and what the Lord has done in reconciliation, but just all of our experience has really helped prepare us for this. I should also say that after Teen Challenge, the Lord did many amazing things. First, I was able to serve there for a couple years as part of a staff. And so that was incredible just to be able to give back and also to learn and gain experience on how to serve a ministry like this going forward. And because of my childhood, I didn't graduate high school. I was a dropout. I got my GED eventually. But an incredible part of my testimony is at the age of 35, the Lord called me to go to college. And I was like, well, my wife kind of nudged me too. She was like, I think it might be good. I'm like, but yeah, I went back. I didn't go back. I went for the first time to college. And, who would have thought, And so I got an associate degree in biblical studies, and the Lord gave me the wisdom at this age to do very well in that. So it's just so many things the Lord has done to equip us. And so this is a vision of the next step of hopefully, Lord willing, building a ministry facility. They've gotten by where they're at right now, but it really just happened, and it's not situated to support that number of boys. The 28 boys that currently live on site in Sansa share one shower, one toilet between them all. And so there's just so many things, but what we hope to do is to continue the work that's already been done here. We've drilled a well recently, which is critical to life and to building, because you can't live without water, and because it's concrete and masonry there, you can't build without water. And so that's another part of my role with the commercial construction I used to do here in the States, is to project manage and just make sure that this vision moves forward well. Next slide, please. And so, this is just basically a synopsis of what I've just said. Our mission is to go and serve. I'll be working with the boys every day to love on them, to disciple them, to share with them my journey with Jesus, and then also to help bring the facility into the next stages. And I will let Laura just give a snapshot of her role.
Yeah, so one of the exciting things is UNICEF has actually recently taken an interest in Zambia specifically, and there are opportunities. Essentially, society has cast these children out as the unseen and the unlovable, and they really are not recognizing the children on the streets. So it's very motivational and inspirational for us to be able to see that other organizations are taking an interest. And so my role is going to be kind of continuing that advocacy and awareness through communications, social media, just trying to really get Nsanza's name out there as somewhere that can receive aid. They really do live day to day by faith. But it's been very hard for them to grow or even just maintain consistency in their services, just because they don't have the resources, and they really rely heavily on local organizations to support them. So our hope is that we can help them both with the new land, and they really want to work with girls. Child marriage is still very, very prominent there. Girls can marry as soon as they hit puberty, and it's essentially child exploitation. So we have a lot of the orphans issues is because of the child marriage. So our hope is to begin working with young girls on the streets as well as the rural areas as well.
All right, next slide, please. So this is a picture of the current student body at Nsanza. It's maybe a little difficult for you guys to see clearly, but in the future, you can go to our website, which we have a lot of content and updates and information on not only Nsanza Village, which is the ministry that we're serving at in Zambia, but also just our family's journey. And so what we have here is just some prayer cards, a snapshot of the ministry, which there will be, there's a pile of these in the back. Please feel free to grab one, pray for us. But also our contact information is on there, our email and our website. And that's what Laura does so well. She's just gifted in communication and content and really just telling the stories of our lives and others. And so we have onboarded with a ministry called C10, Commission to Every Nation. So that's our mission support arm. They take care of us with pastoral care team to make sure that we're receiving the emotional and spiritual support that we need as a family as we go to serve, because unfortunately a lot of missionaries don't have that. Things happen on the field and they come off before fulfilling their assignment. And so our family, we're going both as full-time missionaries. We'll be working with Nsanza as servants there. And so we are self-supporting. So we're asking anybody who would consider to partner with us as long-term missionaries. The Lord has not given us an end date. He said go. And so we're there until he says that that assignment is finished. Whether it's 5 years or 10, we don't know, but we're okay with that. And so we'll go over 10 to 11 months at a time living in country, and then we'll come back for a 4 to 6 week visit and to visit our friends and family. And so, yeah, we are asking for people to pray about monthly support. That helps us because of our budget. Though Zambia is extremely poor, living in the capital is not as cheap. And so our family has a budget of $7,500. That's all our airfares and insurance and evacuation crisis insurance, student education, and then our housing. So, yeah, if that's something you would pray about and consider, we'd be honored. But any type of support, we're thankful and grateful, even if it's a one-time gift. But that's our family's ask and need. And then long term, yeah, the ministry needs help, and we don't know exactly what that looks like, but we know that once we get on the ground and build relationship, we'll be able to communicate that. But maybe there's some individuals in here that are driven by this mission or construction gifted and would like to partner with building. That would be incredible. But I thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak with you. You want to say something too? You can. And my last plug here is the visitation. This ministry is very open to teams coming. And so I mentioned that earlier. We would love to have a team or teams or individuals or couples, whatever it looks like, to come and visit us in Zambia. Because it is in the capital city, the international airport is right there. So logistically, it's very, it makes it very easy for teams to come, and they have good lodging. So don't worry, you don't have to stay in the bush if you don't want to.
And I just wanted to add on to that. So our website is weareallinforjesus.com, and it's not on here, but it's on our card. And I want you to know that we have one-way tickets to Zambia, and we leave on August 4th. We are homeless. We are about to be vehicleless, and we are very little left to our name, and we could not be more filled with joy. So I just want to just close with that, to just if you catch anything today of what we've shared, I just hope that my prayer for you is that you can find a similar calling that just really puts you on fire for Christ.
Amen.
We're going to be praying for these guys, so they're going to stay up here. But I'm going to ask them a couple of questions. But first of all, isn't that encouraging? You know, in America, we are so driven by what we can see and put our hands on. And I think that closing sentence she said, that we're homeless, soon to be vehicleless, everything that America says. That's what shows and gives me meaning and purpose and contentment and joy. And she's like, we're completely fulfilled just with Jesus. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, is that not gorgeous? So there's a couple things I want to, Howie, if you could go back to the one slide, I'm just going to highlight a couple things you told me about that I'm interested in selfishly. Howie, if you could put the slide on with the people along the side, I think it was like the third one in, it had all those young people there. That one there. Yes, we met for lunch, and Morgan was showing me, if I don't kind of highlight a couple things, you can see they have bottles here. Most of them, if not all of them, have bottles, and that's what he says, that's what they're huffing right then and there in that picture. It's just, drugs are all over the place, and so it's just like, holy cow, it's not just, oh, wow, they go do it in the back alley. No, they're literally have their, am I correct, right? Their drug bottles right there with them. And I'm like, wow, that is traumatic. And then if you could go back to the slide with the building process and where they're at and stuff like that. Yeah, forward, that one, yes. He shared with me, they've got these done, and he has some pictures he showed me of the land that was gifted to you guys, or to the ministry. Yes, I'm sorry, to the ministry. And it's a gorgeous piece of property. But I told them as a church we're going to start to support them. But explain what that $55,000 actually does cover. I was shocked at how much you could get for $55,000.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the next stage of this construction process is to build a boys' dorm. And so that would allow them to live on site just outside the city, kind of get them out of that environment, but also give them an adequate living situation. Like I said, they live in a shipping container with bunk beds, which they're grateful for, but we want them to have a place that can really be a home. And so for $55,000 US, it's about a 60 by 80 building done by a professional contractor. We've had these prints and bid done by a professional contractor. And so over there, because of termites and other bugs, it's all concrete and masonry. So this isn't just a slap together building. This is a nice block building, fully done with furniture inside, turnkey, ready for the boys to move in. And we would do it a lot like Teen Challenge, probably 4 beds to a room to give some level of privacy.
Thank you. Yeah, and like I thought to myself, wow, how cool is that you can do that? And the things that we take so for granted, when he showed me those pictures on Wednesday of the shipping container, I mean, it's sobering. Like he said, they're thankful for that because it beats where they are living or the non-living in the middle of the streets or the ditches and stuff. And to think of ourselves as, wow, that's home to a whole bunch of boys right there. And I'm thinking, wow, what a sobering statement. And so there's one other thing I was going to talk about, and I can't remember what it is right now. But I guess I would like to ask, do anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? Deb. She asked, how addictive are those drugs?
Extremely. I mean, we heard a story of a child who had been laying just passed out and had their arm cut off by a train, and they were taken immediately to the hospital. And when they came from being passed out, when they came to awareness, the pull of the addiction was worse than the pain, and they left bleeding out to go back to the drug. So it is, I mean, we can't even fathom, but the cravings for it are just unreal.
Yeah, sure. That's essentially phase 1 of the program, is a detox phase where we help the boys work through that process of detox. But Pastor Jasper, he operates with a huge heart of compassion and grace, but he is firm, and it's a zero drug facility. And so he is very strict on that and has a zero tolerance because the pull is so great. So if one boy was to bring some in, that lure is there, and some of those other boys that have been clean would be tempted for sure.
And one thing I want to add on to is it's like they are not like committed to being here. Like they are there by choice. So there's no one, like the doors are always unlocked. Like at any point the boys can leave. But they want this. Like they have seen the heartache on the streets. They've seen their dysfunctional parents. They want to break the cycle. And so there is that drive for sobriety and for something different. And I do want to mention too that it's unfortunate too, because the older boys introduce the youngest children immediately on the streets so that they can run them. So it's very addictive.
Yeah, last slide, please, quick. So that's a great point. So a lot of these boys have been there for about 8-9 years. So Nsanza has been stewarding children for about 10 years. And so the older boys have now been there under the leadership, and there's varying times that these children have been there. But the 28 boys that are currently there, like they're committed. And not only are they committed, but they're being trained up as young pastors and evangelists to go back out into the world and reach their people for Christ. So it isn't just a landing spot, but they are training up. Missionaries, there's one young man that we have communication with who went through Nsanza, and he's now a missionary to Southeast Asia, traveling all over. And so that is the heart of Nsanza Village, to train up young followers of Jesus that go out into the world, whether it's as a pastor or as a mechanic, but they're going to be ambassadors for Jesus.
Anybody else have any questions? He asked if English was the main language.
Yeah, so English is the national language. It was a British colony. So in the capital of Lusaka, you're going to do okay. Most people speak English, but you get out into the rural bush, that's where it's dicey, because there's 70 plus tribes scattered throughout Zambia. Most Zambians live in the bush, about 15 million or so of the 20. And so there are 70 different languages. So you won't learn them all.
So if any of you are fluent in any of the bush languages, you could join us on a... And actually, Tim and Carl, who are our directors, Tim is kind of the point man, as you've gotten some emails, who are on our missions team. We're actually going to be grabbing lunch with these guys after, and dreaming and praying about at some point being able to partner as a church with a missions team to be able to go over there. And I love the idea of being able to literally do the hands and feet work of Christ. You know, it's fun and needed to be able to write a check or to support them that way, and obviously that's necessary. But I think it's even more fulfilling to be able to actually get your hands dirty, hit your thumb with a hammer for Jesus a few times, and to actually leave an impact for the generations to come. But does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, we got two of them. We'll do you, Debbie, and then we'll do Brenda after that.
So what's the average length of time that kids are going to stay there? And then are they like graduated out? Or how do they, how do you know that they're ready to move on?
Yes, so that's a great question. And that's something we're actually still navigating. So when Nsanza was started, it was like they would take essentially anyone they could until they hit capacity. But as Morgan shared, like some of the boys have been there 8-9 years now, and they are reaching adulthood. So there is not a structure in place to phase them out. What they have right now is kind of an underlying discussion of, it's like, are you ready to have a stable life? Do you have a career plan? Like, what is your next steps? But that's something that we're really going to be working with them with, is that as we begin now to phase some of the older boys out and bring in the younger, how do we have a structure in place where it's like, it's a big deal to be an adult. Like it's an accomplishment. These boys should be celebrated when they can graduate and move on and like begin having disciples of their own. So that's a good question. It's still very much in the works.
But yeah, there's really no time limit on how long they can be there. And so there's boys that come and don't stay long because they go back to the streets, and that's unfortunate. But most of the children have been there. They come and they stay. Like I said at the beginning, their family, that's kind of how they operate. And so, yeah, some of the older boys have been there 8, 9, 10 years now. And they are getting ready to transition out.
and Brenda.
How many boys are in the dorm now? And when you get this dorm built, how many more are you going to accept, I guess?
Right now, just for my own clarification, it's just the shipping containers now. Is that correct? But then will be a larger capacity when the dorm is built.
Yeah, so currently there are 28 boys that reside at Nsanza. When we were there were about 35. So it does fluctuate some, but I would say they are consistently over 25. And so most sleep in the shipping container. There's bunk beds stacked in there. There's not a lot of personal space for other things. And then it's okay. There's a small one-room building, which is like their multi-purpose building for worship, preaching, education. Yeah, over here. This is just an open, small building. I mean, not much bigger than this area up here. And they'll also drag mattresses in there at night. And then sometimes, if it's nicer out, they'll overflow on mattresses outside. The new facility, our concept that we have drawn up for the first building is a 40-bed dorm. So that would accept the current student body and also allow for some growth. And then, Lord willing, because it's all resource driven at this point, we would prayerfully inquire on either building a girls' dorm, or if the need was still greater with the boys, maybe a second boys' dorm.
We'll say one more question, and then I want to say a couple things, and we'll pray with them. So anybody else have a final question? Okay. Oh, I thought Solomon raised his hand, but he was moving the camera. I thought he was going to ask. Anyway, just a couple things. Two options or two opportunities to be able to support them. On the back of the card, which is back at the giving station, the little table there, there's a QR code. This will take you directly to be able to support them. And if you want to do it like with a check, if you want to write a check out and put it in the giving station, please write it out to Risen Church, and then in the memo line, write it out to Morgan and Laura, and then we will cut them one check specifically from church here. So anyway, if you come over here, let's have you guys, if you guys want to come up and stand around them, and if any of you guys want to put your hands on them, if you want to say where you're at and reach out to them, come down this way a little bit more. Let's get you in the middle. We're going to pray over these guys. They have a